Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we have the distinct honor of welcoming Mr. Jim Towey, the founder of Aging with Dignity, 5 Wishes, and the author of the book, To Love and Be Loved, a personal portrait of Mother Teresa. Welcome, Mr. Towey.
Great to be with you, Lance, and thank you.
It's our pleasure. So may we call you Jim?
Please.
So Jim, let's, for our viewers and listeners, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of background, what ultimately led to the creation of Aging with Dignity and then subsequently 5 Wishes. They would love to learn a little bit more about your experience and background.
Well, back in 1996, when I started Aging with Dignity, I was concerned about the gathering clouds of assisted suicide and euthanasia that were forming because, and I felt that Americans deserved a better choice between pain or poison. And the reality is we weren't giving very good palliative care. We weren't giving patients self-determination rights, so they had a say in their care decisions. And so it was just not a good situation. I thought, well, there has to be a third way. And so Aging with Dignity, thought, what if we got into the hands of people a tool that would help them plan for and discuss end-of-life care and educate them on their rights and help them navigate a very difficult to understand terrain on end-of-life decision-making. And so that's how 5 Wishes arose. But when Aging with Dignity started, I didn't have 5 wishes in mind. I simply saw the landscape and felt like we don't need to have a shouting match at the end of life like you've seen at the beginning of the life. Why not find a third way that can get people to work together toward better end-of-life care and patient self-determination and decision-making that runs short of euthanasia? Because I do worry. It's always easier to kill someone than to care for them. And we're seeing now in Canada what happens down that slippery slope. And now they're expanding it to disabled people and mentally ill people and even youth. So I think there's a better way, and that's why Aging with Dignity was formed.
Wonderful. And, I want to just touch on that a little bit. I was in high school here in Michigan when the rise of Dr. Jack Kevorkian was taking place, because, of course, he's here in Michigan as well. And, that was something, at least up until that point, nothing was really ever discussed about, assisted suicides, and it wasn't really a mainstream topic. And you really did see a rise in that, and, kind of the fallout from, you go through difficult times with your health and you may not have a promising outcome with your diagnosis, but being strong in our faith, that's not something that we could really get behind. And you kind of, it sounds like, saw that same need and then ultimately led to the creation of 5 Wishes, which we were just speaking previously, has sold over 40 some million copies now, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you're right. I just felt like people felt frustrated because there was a certain appeal to what Jack Kevorkian was doing. I mean, a surface appeal. He was relieving people's misery and pain and in effect putting them out of their misery. The problem was he wasn't addressing the underlying issues of the people's feeling of being a burden to others, that they weren't accompanied, that their pain wasn't properly managed early enough until they reached the breaking point, And so, why would you not want to address the underlying causes? And that's why even today, when you look at Canada's scheme, they see people that are miserable and in poverty that have no money. And so they're saying, well, here, you can kill yourself and we'll help you. That's not a solution, why don't you deal with their poverty and give them a chance to have a meaningful, full life like everybody else? So I do think that 5 Wishes came along at the right time. And then the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation was very generous. Vicki Weisfeld led the way. After Nancy Brand initially got us the first grant, Vicki took over and really was the champion of 5 Wishes for a subsequent grant. And then it became national, and Eunice Kennedy Shriver joined me in 1998. So Lance, that's 25 years ago. And she joined me at the National Press Club. Here, this great woman, the brother of John F. Kennedy, standing there, realizing we needed to help families plan for and discuss these matters and assert their legal rights, and to let patients have a voice, and they're not just some slab of meat on a conveyor belt in the healthcare system. So that's how we started it. And yeah, you're right, it took off. Now 30 languages. So it's used all over the world.
And I was sharing with you, we just helped to acknowledge and celebrate in November of this year will be the 25th anniversary of Five Wishes. And there's going to be some exciting things, it sounds like, to celebrate and recognize that coming down the road.
That's right. That's right. Joanne Eason, who's the president of Five Wishes, is, we're going to be looking at scheduling events and opportunities to realize this was a grassroots movement. This wasn't Walmart or CVS or someone coming in, one of the big healthcare insurers or someone. This was all grassroots, bubble up from the bottom. These are little churches and home healthcare agencies, groups like what you've been doing, and that just realize this is what patients want, and it's in a language they understand. And really, our legislatures have failed us. Congress hasn't really made it easy. The statutory forms are all legalese. Nobody understands them, and they're not even usable in a care setting. Patient care setting. So we felt like Five Wishes was, addressing something, and we haven't tampered with it in 25 years, and we haven't changed its price either.
Yes.
Think about that in 25 years.
No inflation there, correct?
None. No, we feel like death doesn't change, so our price wouldn't either. So we've kept it at $5 for an individual copy, and we've never turned down anybody who couldn't afford one. So yeah, we've been very thankful to God, and we've had generous donors that have supported our mission and our advocacy. So Aging with Dignity, I think, has an important voice in these discussions now that are really gathering momentum because of the retirement of the baby boom.
Absolutely. And just one last thing I want to touch on with Five Wishes. And, I was privileged enough to welcome Joanne Eastman, the president of Five Wishes, last year on for an interview to discuss Five Wishes. And I just shared with you, I first became aware of it during college, during a hospice and palliative care course that I was taking. And at the time, it really didn't make sense to me, in the sense that part of the assignment was we had to fill out the Five Wishes for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that was probably one of the most influential assignments that I had in my college career, believe it or not. And what it did was it made me stop and think, first, we're not going to live forever. And age is really just but a number, because anybody can have an accident. Anything can happen at any time. And it's not only for the person that, befalls on, poor illness or sickness, but it's for the families to be able to know how to best support their loved one in the event their loved one is unable to advocate for themselves or express their wishes. So it really, I don't want to call it a burden, but in a sense, it takes that pressure or burden, if you will, off of their family to decide, well, would they want this or would they not? And that's why now in my professional life, I was sharing with you, with our company, every family we meet with, we mention and provide a copy of Five Wishes to them if their family needs those decisions written down and decided on, because none of us know what tomorrow holds. And the last thing we want to do is put off something that is so easily completed and taken care of. You don't need a lawyer to complete it. It's very, very inexpensive and very affordable if you want to buy it for yourself on the Five Wishes website or through Aging with Dignity. And I just recommend everybody stop and have that conversation with their loved one, or even do it for themselves like we were made to do in college, because something so simple can really have such a profound, lasting impact on lives in very meaningful ways. So as I've told you, we're huge supporters of the work that you have done with Aging with Dignity and Five Wishes. And it's a real true honor for us, Jim, to have you here as our guest. And we wanted to talk about your book, because your book is very profound, because without Mother Teresa, is it fair to say there may not be an Aging with Dignity? Absolutely.
No, yeah. She inspired it. She led me to it. And the Five Wishes was developed in her home for the dying, for people with AIDS. And so there are so many tie-ins to Mother Teresa and, of course, my own personal life that, without Mother Teresa, Aging with Dignity wouldn't exist. I went and got her blessing and talked to her about what I was trying to do. She sent a letter of support, which she addressed to the people of Florida. It was kind of cute, how do you address a general letter? But she wanted to be supportive. And so that letter has meant a lot to us and our staff. And the focus is, too, on the elderly poor and the disabled, and which she called the little ones. And so, I have a debt to Mother, and that's why once I got some breathing room from the different jobs I've had that required my full attention, well, COVID came, and the world took a little bit of a time out, and what that allowed me to do is write the book. So when I left Ave Maria University, which was founded by a great Michigander, Tom Monahan, when I left the university after 9 years, I went and straight away said, well, now I can write the book, and so I did.
Wonderful. One of the things I wanted to do to get your response to this, if you don't mind, there's some wonderful endorsements for the book from renowned individuals, but we went to the people. We went to Amazon, and we were looking through some of the reviews that have been left for the book, To Love and Be Loved. And one of the reviews that really stood out, at least for me, and there may be others on there because there's remarkable reviews for the book. This reviewer had titled it, "I was sorry to see it end." And they said, this is a beautiful, inspiring book. They've read it twice. They called it moving, thought-provoking, and powerful. They go on to say that Mother Teresa comes alive as a woman fiercely in love with God. And they felt through the book that they caught a glimpse of the woman rather than the image of a plaster of a Paris saint. And they said they've read a lot of books, but this was their favorite in 2022. How does that make you feel, just how you're having such an impact on people and sharing the legacy and kind of pulling the curtain back, if you will, a little bit on the more personal portrait, like you say on the cover, of Mother Teresa?
Well, I mean, that's delightful to hear, Lance. I mean, what a lovely choice of words by the reviewer, and really kind of everything that she said was what my desire was when I wrote the book. I wanted to show Mother Teresa's humanness. I wanted to show that how real she was, that she liked chocolate, that she laughed, that she cried, she had back pain, that she took pain medicine, to get into some of the details of her life, including her last days, with the hope that it would make her more approachable and I think more relevant to people's lives. And that review makes me feel grateful to God. Mother Teresa used to say that she was a pencil in the hand of God that he wrote love letters to the world with. I'm no Mother Teresa. I make that clear in the book. I'm no saint. But I'm grateful whenever I hear that the Lord used me through this book to touch someone's life. And I hope it touches more. And Mary and I aren't keeping the royalties. They're going to the Missionaries of Charity, to other charities aligned with Mother's work. And so we're not keeping a penny of it. So I'm hoping that people will get the book. It's not well known, but I think it's going to spread word of mouth just like Five Wishes did.
Absolutely. And when you set forth to write this book, what was your greatest hope from writing? What that would come from it?
Introduce her to a new generation of people. The internet has smeared her name, really. You've got things that have been posted that are untrue. Everybody wants to tear down the sacred and tear down icons of religious importance. And so, people can't stand the Catholic Church or have their grievances. And so what a better way to strike a blow at the church than to take down one of its leading exemplars. And so I wanted young people. So one chapter is devoted to the critics to simply rebut the mistruths, untruths, and misstatements. And I saw that was one goal. Certainly wanted to give that human side portrait so that we don't turn into a plastic saint. Certainly wanted to get on the record some of these stories from great women that had served with Mother Teresa in the early days, and some of these young priests that had followed her and started her Missionaries of Charity Fathers, because they had great stories. And these people that, Mother's nuns knew her better than I did. I was privileged. I tell the story in the book of how I got to work for her, got to be her lawyer, got to, travel with her some, got to, brief her on a lot of legal matters and government issues, government relations, immigration for her sister, so forth. So those were privileged moments. And so you feel a real obligation to give back. I mean, Mother changed my life, changed the directory of my life. I know that was God working through her, but I have a real, attachment to Mother. It's been 25 years. That's when I wrote the book on the anniversary to coincide with the anniversary of her 25th anniversary. And so I wanted this book to come out then, and Simon & Schuster was great to publish it. But I'm hoping that it makes her accessible to people of all faiths or none at all.
Right.
You don't have to be Catholic to read this. You don't have to believe in God to read this, but you can certainly believe in humanity. And in Mother Teresa, she was no ordinary soul that walked the earth.
No, that's for sure. When you went through and you were interviewing some of the other sisters or nuns that had spent more maybe personal time with her, or time that might have been different from yours, were there any stories that you hadn't heard before that have really stood out that you'd like to share?
So many of them, Lance, and they're throughout the book, but they were just great stories of little things. The thing that was so beautiful about Mother Teresa was the little things that she did. Those were the great things about Mother. And, so I tell a lot of the stories of the early days and the sisters telling, where Mother's telling them they had no permission to get sick. They were doing all this work in the streets. They had 26 women in this tiny, tiny flat that wouldn't even be 1,000 square feet. And they had one bathroom for 26 women, which I jokingly referred to as her first miracle. But they were all devoted to going out there and alleviating the suffering of the poor, what Mother called Jesus in his distressing disguise of the poorest of the poor. And so these young schoolgirls that had been taught by Mother Teresa then decided to follow her. And so I have stories in there about those early days and how scandalous it was for them to see Mother Teresa dressed in this cheap cotton sari that beggars wore. Even these girls, when they would join and follow Mother Teresa and become her nuns, their parents were scandalized by this. Why would their daughter not be dressing appropriately? Why are they wearing these cheap cotton saris? So, reaching out to the lepers at a time when no one did, AIDS when no one did. Mother Teresa was always piercing barriers of where people had isolated themselves from others, and she loved the people whether they were lepers or not. And yes, a lot of stories, some funny stories in chapters about her. She liked to play pranks on her sisters. She'd like to get a laugh. She loved to laugh. So I felt like that was important, but also when you look at her life, she was also a woman of sorrow. She suffered a great deal, and she knew darkness, and she saw the agony of her people who were dying for want of bread. And so, there was a seriousness to Mother and a cheerfulness to Mother that coexisted. I've never seen anything like that, where there'd be such intense seriousness and cheerfulness side by side, but that was Mother.
When she first set out to go into these colonies, that was unheard of at that time, correct?
Right. For a woman, unheard of.
For a woman. And, I don't think probably most people today who aren't familiar with her story realize what a deal that was when she first set out on this, I call it mission of hers, and this work and this servancy. These leper colonies and these individuals, they were outcasts from society entirely. And she took it upon herself to go into these colonies and show these people humanity. And that's right. I think there are multitude of lessons just from that example alone that we could apply to our lives today.
Absolutely. And she said Calcutta is everywhere if you have eyes to see.
Yes.
You're a specialist in long-term care issues, and you understand the loneliness and that terrible disease of loneliness that afflicts so many people. We don't have to go to Calcutta. People are starving for friendship here, thirsting for acceptance, understanding, accompaniment. So, yeah, I think Mother was very clear to people, don't go off to faraway lands. Do something in your own family, your own neighborhood, in your own community, because there is this spiritual poverty that's every bit as torturous. She didn't think leprosy or AIDS were the worst diseases she ever saw. She felt loneliness was. And so much of her life was spent, and that's why I titled the book To Love and Be Loved, because so much of her life was spent around that. that she saw that that was the fundamental need of a human being, more than food, shelter, or clothing, was to love and to be loved. And that's what she went about doing.
And Jim, has there been any feedback you've received personally from somebody that has read the book that has stood out to you?
Oh gosh, I've been overwhelmed by what people have told me. Because when you're writing a book, you never know how it's going to be. And I'd never written a book before. And in the acknowledgement section, I took a lot of time to explain how the book came into being, because I had some people help me. I wanted it to be my own words, but my initial draft was so poorly organized. And so I had real professionals, Emily McLean, Robert Messenger, Bonnie Woodbury. Those three were extraordinary in helping me get it right to the point where it would be readable. But I've gotten a lot of people say nice things about the book. I'm amazed by it. People that I know well too, that were grateful that I'd shared some of my own story, and that were just, they felt like this called them to change their lives and to try to be more loving and giving and serving others. Because Mother Teresa had said, a life that's not lived for others is not worth living. And I think it's a wake-up call in a country where we've become a little complacent post-COVID, where we're not going and being around others. I worry about artificial intelligence. It's just building new barriers, telemedicine, where we don't have face-to-face human contact. Human beings crave company and accompaniment.
Yeah.
And they need human beings to do this. They don't want robots. They don't want to look into a screen for a doctor's appointment. They want to see someone.
Absolutely.
So I do feel like we've dehumanized healthcare. We need to rehumanize it, you know, and that's what Mother Teresa would be saying, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Just a couple more questions. And again, we so appreciate your time today and sharing Mother Teresa's story and the amazing work that Aging with Dignity and Five Wishes is doing. And we hope to be there to help celebrate in November, the 25th anniversary. And we're looking forward to 25 more. And
good.
One of the things that stood out, and maybe you could elaborate on this, is did Mother Teresa slap a statue?
She did. She was trying to wake it up. I mean, she was in her office, and one sister was cleaning, and this box came in. There was a box underneath it, and Mother asked her to take out what was in it. Well, it was someone had made a statue of Mother sitting in a prayerful pose that I guess they'd seen her in, and so they wanted to do a statue of her. So it was sitting there in the box, and Mother took it out, and then she started to slap it, you know, like, wake up, you know, and the sisters were squealing in laughter, you know, but then she had them put it back in the box, and it sat under the stairs till she died. It's actually now in the exact place where she used to sit in the Mother House Chapel in Calcutta. They put it there as a remembrance, but while she was alive, she laughed at the caricatures of her, and, you know, and she laughed at the people that wanted to make statues out of, not at them, but just, she just didn't pay any attention to it. The awards, any of it just didn't matter to her. She'd melt down the gold medals. You know, President Reagan joked about that. I tell that story in the book. But yeah, so Mother, she had a good sense of humor and could laugh at herself. And I think it helped people just love her more, to appreciate the beauty of her humanity and what God did with it.
And I think for me, that's the prime message of Mother Teresa and her life's work is, you know, she didn't look at value. She didn't look at material items. She looked at the person, and she looked at what she could do to maybe encourage and inspire others to carry on her work like you've done, and probably countless others in the world. Do you think there will ever be a person that could reach the level of impact that Mother Teresa had?
I don't know, because it's all according to God's plan. You know, nobody would have looked at that 18-year-old getting on a ship in Skopje and traveling across the ocean to Ireland and then to India and landing there and going off to teach in a boarding school. No one would have looked at her and said, that woman's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize one day.
Right.
You know, so God has raised up in times many saints, not just canonized ones like Mother, but you see this in home care. These, you know, someone whose husband's got Alzheimer's, and this woman is just laying down her life to care for her spouse, you know. Well, those are saintly people that are loving until it hurts, giving until it hurts, as Mother used to say. So I do think God is raising up today many, many, many saints that are doing extraordinary work with the disabled, with the juvenile delinquents and drug addicts and prisoners. You go around and look at where there's brokenness, and you see light everywhere by people volunteering and getting food together for the hungry and welcoming refugees and immigrants and so forth. So, yeah, I think it's tempting to get discouraged by the world that we live in, but there are many lights. And if God wants one to have the national prominence that Mother Teresa had, then that's easily done. And but in the meantime, Mother Teresa described what she did as a drop in the bucket.
Right.
She said the ocean was better she said what I do is a drop in the ocean, but the ocean's better for the drop. Well, we all feel that way, don't we, Lance? I mean, that what we do may have but she said God doesn't call her to be successful. God calls her to be faithful. And I think if we remind ourselves that, whether you're in home care dealing with dying people with Parkinson's, MS, it's difficult work to care for people with chronic illness, terminal illness, people that are in advanced age, dementia and such. It's difficult work, but that faithfulness is beautiful and it matters. And as your company, All Home Care Matters. I mean, these little things that we do matter. Right. It upholds human dignity, and in doing so, it honors God.
Yes, amen to that. The last question I do want to leave you with, Jim, is let's talk to Jim 30 years ago, prior to your first encounter in the time spent with Mother Teresa. How do you differ from Jim pre-Mother Teresa versus what you were after your time with her? What was your perspective and outlook? How did that change?
Well, I hope I cover that in the book because I spend the first few chapters talking about where I was at the time when I met her, and then my transition to where I started to get a comfort level working around the poor and the dying and such. I shudder to think what my life would be like had I not met Mother, but all of us are a compilation of our choices, aren't we?
Right.
I remember an NBA basketball coach told me one time, he said, we're as good as our last game, and in that league. And I thought about that in the spiritual life, that we're kind of as good as our last prayer. You could have done heroic things 20 years ago, but what are you doing today? And it's kind of, that's why the call to service is the call that has stood throughout the Judeo-Christian tradition, is the highest calling of man, to be other-minded, to lay down your life for others in the ways big and small. And so for me, I marvel at what God's done. I've been married 31 years, 5 children, 3 grandchildren. I'm grateful to God. I've made a mess of things at times. God knows. The people that work with me will tell you I'm no saint, Lance, at times, but we all are a work in progress, aren't we? And Mother was a work in progress. She got angry. She was impatient. She was stubborn. And she was the first to admit it.
Right.
So I think we all expect the mercy of God over time really does kind of permeate our lives and changes us if we allow it. But the choice is ours. We can choose to accept these graces, or we can ignore them and refuse them. And but if we accept them, well, then the Lord is transformative in our lives. And that's been true with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Elijah, Samuel. You go down to David, all the yes. great figures in the Old Testament, and then, of course, in Christendom. So you and I know the deal. What you've got to do, I'm not called to do. What I'm supposed to do, you're not called to do, but we can do it together. And that was one of Mother's great quotes, but together we can do something beautiful for God.
I think that's a perfect way to summarize it. Jim, we thank you so much for your time. We'll have the links to Aging with Dignity, 5 Wishes, and the book in the show notes. And we encourage all of our viewers and listeners to pick up a copy of each of them. And we just can't thank you enough for your time today and the tremendous work that you're doing and helping to share this remarkable legacy of Mother Teresa. Thank you so much.
God bless you, and thank you, Lance, for all you're doing.
God bless you. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Mr. Jim Towey, the author of the new book, To Love and Be Loved, a personal portrait of Mother Teresa, for joining us today here on All Home Care Matters. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.